I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Something inside Buckingham Palace has shifted.
It really has been a very tough time for the royal family.
And this time, it's not just another rumor. Reports suggest that Camilla's son has been pushed out of royal circles after Princess Anne made a deeply unsettling revelation behind closed doors.
Do you worry about Republic coming and shouting things
Everyone has a right to think what they want.
So what exactly was uncovered, and why did it trigger such a decisive reaction within the monarchy? With tensions simmering beneath the surface, this development raises questions about influence, loyalty, and control. Is this a necessary move to protect the institution, or a sign of deeper fractures within the royal family? Now, what do you think about this royal fallout and hidden tensions? Could there be more behind it than anyone is admitting? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more royal updates and stories like this. The quiet royal exclusion. In recent days, a quiet but unsettling shift has been reported within royal circles, as Camilla's son appears to have been suddenly pushed away from spaces he once moved through without question. What makes the situation more striking is how quickly his presence disappeared from royal-linked events, leaving behind unanswered questions and growing curiosity among observers who closely follow the family's internal dynamics. Previously, he was seen in spaces connected to the wider royal environment, but now even those informal appearances have become rare, almost as if access has been quietly restricted without explanation. Palace officials have remained silent on the matter, and this silence has only fueled speculation, with no clear statement offered to confirm or deny what many are beginning to suspect. At the center of these suspicions stands Princess Anne, whose recent reported concerns are believed to have played a role in the unfolding situation, though no official details have been released. Her reputation for strict loyalty to tradition and her cautious approach to internal stability have led some to interpret her involvement as a protective move, while others see it as something more severe. Without clear confirmation, however, the situation remains open to interpretation, with differing voices within and outside the palace offering competing explanations for what may have triggered this sudden exclusion. As tension builds quietly behind the scenes, attention continues to shift toward how far this decision reaches and whether it signals a deeper change in how access and influence are controlled. For now, what remains is uncertainty, with a growing sense that something significant has shifted within the royal structure, even if the full truth has yet to surface. The question that now lingers is whether this quiet exclusion marks a temporary adjustment or the beginning of a longer, more serious realignment within the royal family's inner circle. Within the wider context of royal history, such quiet removals are rarely simple or isolated, and they often point to deeper concerns about trust, influence, and long-term stability inside the institution. While no direct accusation has been publicly confirmed, the growing pattern of distance and restriction continues to raise questions that cannot be easily dismissed by observers or the public. Many now watch closely to see whether further changes follow, especially in how individuals connected to Camilla are treated within official settings. The uncertainty surrounding Princess Anne's reported involvement only adds another layer of complexity, making it difficult to separate fact from interpretation. As speculation continues to grow, the situation stands as a reminder that behind the polished image of royalty, decisions are often made quietly, shaped by caution and concern rather than open explanation, leaving the public to piece together meaning from limited signs. But if Camilla's son was truly pushed out quietly, what exactly triggered such a firm reaction behind closed doors? And why does Princess Anne's name keep surfacing without official explanation? Could this be a simple misunderstanding, or is something deeper reshaping royal access from within? Let's uncover the astonishing details. Anne's silent intervention. In recent internal developments within royal circles, Princess Anne is reported to have stepped forward in a quiet but decisive manner, setting off a chain of reactions that has unsettled the wider royal environment. Without making any public announcement, her intervention is believed to have intensified scrutiny around an ongoing situation already surrounded by uncertainty, including the sudden distancing of Camilla's son from familiar royal-linked spaces. Known for her long-standing reputation as a strict defender of royal duty and institutional integrity, Anne's involvement is being viewed by some observers as consistent with her established approach to internal discipline and stability within the monarchy. Her history of prioritizing order and tradition has led to interpretations that her actions are not driven by personal sentiment, but by a perceived responsibility to safeguard the structure of the institution. The turning point in the situation is described as a private internal disclosure attributed to Anne, characterized not as an attack, but as a duty-driven warning meant to address what she reportedly perceived as a developing vulnerability within the royal environment. This revelation, though not publicly detailed, has been referred to in internal discussions as disturbing due to its implications for trust and access within the institution. Following this development, reports suggest a noticeable rise in internal concern across the palace hierarchy, as senior figures began reassessing the implications of Anne's warning and its potential connection to recent exclusions and restricted access. The atmosphere is described as increasingly cautious, with discussions shifting from routine management to deeper questions about loyalty and control within the institution. As a result, interpretations of Anne's role remain divided, with some viewing her actions as a necessary safeguard against internal instability, while others suspect that the warning signals a broader reassessment of influence and proximity within royal operations. The lack of official clarification continues to deepen uncertainty, allowing speculation to grow around the true scale of the issue. Within the broader narrative of royal operations, the situation is increasingly viewed as a potential turning point that reflects how internal warnings can quickly evolve into structural shifts affecting access and influence across the institution. Even without public confirmation, the sequence of events following Anne's intervention suggests a tightening of internal boundaries and a more cautious approach to association within royal circles. Observers continue to monitor developments, aware that what began as a quiet warning may represent something more enduring in the way the monarchy manages trust and internal stability moving forward. The unfolding uncertainty leaves many questions unanswered about future alignments within the royal structure and whether further decisions will reinforce or redefine existing relationships at the highest level of the institution, leaving the situation publicly unresolved and open to interpretation. With Princess Anne's quiet intervention now echoing through the palace, what truly lies behind the growing divide? Was this a protective warning, or the start of something far more calculated? And who else inside the royal circle already knows what comes next in silent shadows? Let's find out. Hidden lines unseen. In the aftermath of the earlier exclusion of Camilla's son from royal-linked spaces, attention inside royal circles began to shift toward a quieter but more complex concern that was not immediately visible to the public. It was not about open scandal or public misconduct, but about something more subtle that involved proximity to influence and the boundaries surrounding royal decision-making. This shift in focus reportedly aligned with concerns attributed to Princess Anne, whose reputation for strict adherence to institutional order framed her response as cautious rather than emotional. According to internal interpretations, the issue being examined was not personal behavior alone, but the degree of access granted to individuals positioned near sensitive areas of royal operations. As discussions developed behind closed doors, unease began to grow among senior members of the institution, who started to view the situation as a matter of control rather than reputation. This interpretation introduced a deeper layer of tension, suggesting that even small shifts in access or proximity could be seen as potential risks to institutional authority. While no direct confirmation was offered publicly, alternative perspectives began to emerge, with some suggesting that the concern may have been less about individuals and more about preserving clear internal boundaries. This ambiguity allowed speculation to expand further, as observers struggled to separate confirmed action from inferred intent. Within this evolving context, the earlier exclusion of Camilla's son began to be viewed not as an isolated decision, but as part of a wider recalibration of access and influence. Taken together, these developments suggest that the issue extends beyond reputation management and touches on how control is defined and maintained within the royal structure. Ultimately, the situation continues to unfold in a quiet but increasingly charged atmosphere, where official silence contrasts sharply with growing internal awareness of shifting boundaries. Those following the matter closely note that even without public confirmation, the pattern of events points toward a deliberate tightening of access and influence within royal operations. This has led to quiet speculation that the current episode may represent more than a temporary response, instead reflecting a longer-term shift in how proximity to the royal family is managed. At the center of this uncertainty remains Princess Anne's reported role, which continues to be interpreted in multiple ways depending on perspective and position within the broader narrative. As a result, the story remains open, with its meaning still forming as new interpretations emerge, leaving observers to watch closely for any further indication of how far this internal adjustment may extend, or what it ultimately signals about the future balance of influence inside the royal institution, with no definitive conclusion yet in sight, as tensions continue quietly beneath the surface, unfolding uncertainty. What truly triggered the next shift inside the royal inner circle? And why did silence suddenly feel more deliberate than ever? Was Princess Anne acting alone, or reflecting a wider concern no one is ready to speak aloud? And as boundaries tighten further, who might be affected next in ways no one expects? Let's unravel the details. Fault lines inside palace. In the quiet corridors of the royal household, the earlier unease surrounding Camilla's son began to merge into a broader sense of strain, as internal divisions that had long existed beneath the surface started to become more noticeable. What once appeared as isolated concerns now formed part of a larger pattern of tension within the institution. Within this environment, long-standing differences between traditionalists and modernizers within the family became increasingly difficult to ignore. Traditionalists, aligned with strict interpretations of duty and hierarchy, were seen as cautious about any shift that might blur established roles. In contrast, modernizers favored a more flexible approach, seeking to adapt the monarchy to changing public expectations. At the center of this internal divide, Princess Anne's firm and disciplined stance stood out as a defining force. Her approach, often described as unwavering, reinforced the importance of structure and continuity, especially during moments of uncertainty. However, this position also placed her at odds with those who believed the institution needed greater adaptability. Complicating this already delicate balance was the continued sensitivity surrounding Camilla's place within the wider royal framework. Her connection to the family, while established, remained a point of careful consideration when boundaries of access and influence were being reassessed. This added another layer to internal discussions as decision-makers weighed perception against tradition. Against this backdrop, earlier concerns about outsider influence began to take on greater significance, reflecting a historical caution within the monarchy about maintaining clear lines of authority. Even subtle shifts in proximity were being examined more closely, with some viewing them as potential risks to institutional stability. As these interpretations spread quietly within internal conversations, uncertainty grew over whether the situation involving Camilla's son was an isolated outcome or part of a broader recalibration of access and influence. Different perspectives competed without resolution, leaving room for continued speculation. The unfolding situation highlighted how internal disagreements within the royal structure were no longer confined to private debate, but were beginning to influence perceptions of stability at a broader level. It also suggested that decisions involving access, proximity, and trust were becoming increasingly central to how the institution defined its internal boundaries, even when no public explanation was provided. While no official confirmation clarified the exact reasoning behind recent exclusions and warnings, the pattern of careful distancing continued to shape how observers interpreted the situation. This growing sense of uncertainty reinforced the idea that what was unfolding was not merely about individuals, but about the balance of influence that governs internal royal relationships. As a result, attention remained fixed on how these subtle shifts might continue to reshape the structure from within, leaving the broader implications unresolved, and the future course remains unclear. But if these fault lines are only the beginning, what has really been set in motion behind closed doors? Who is quietly shaping the next move, and why does silence feel more revealing than any statement? And as boundaries tighten inside the palace, what truth is still being kept just out of reach? Keep watching. Whispers beneath the crown. In the period following the earlier internal tensions surrounding Camilla's son and Princess Anne's reported concerns, a quieter but increasingly noticeable pattern began to emerge within royal appearances. Without any formal announcements or public statements, subtle shifts in behavior among senior royals started to draw attention from close observers, suggesting that internal positions were gradually aligning around the concerns previously raised. Historically, the royal family has managed disagreement through discretion rather than open confrontation, relying on controlled distance and carefully managed public unity. In this context, even small changes in seating arrangements, event attendance, and interaction levels are often interpreted as meaningful signals, especially when viewed against earlier internal uncertainty. Over time, these small adjustments became more visible. Certain members appeared less frequently alongside those connected to the developing situation, while joint appearances were handled with greater formality and emotional restraint. Rather than direct conflict, there was a noticeable emphasis on separation through scheduling and protocol, creating a sense of quiet distancing that did not require explanation. Media observers and internal commentators began interpreting these patterns as symbolic alignment with Princess Anne's reported stance, even without confirmation. Each reduced appearance or altered interaction was read as a potential sign of agreement, reinforcing the perception that her concerns were being taken seriously across different levels of the institution. However, alternative perspectives suggested that these changes could also reflect routine planning decisions rather than coordinated intent. Despite the uncertainty, the consistency of these subtle shifts continued to shape public interpretation. The absence of open disagreement, combined with a steady pattern of controlled separation, contributed to a growing narrative that internal unity was forming around a cautious position. This perception slowly strengthened as more appearances followed the same restrained pattern. Ultimately, the situation highlighted how influence within the royal structure does not always manifest through direct statements, but often through quiet adjustments that signal internal alignment. Whether driven by agreement or caution, the evolving behavior suggested that the concerns raised earlier were no longer isolated, but part of a broader internal awareness shaping interactions behind palace walls, leaving the full meaning still unfolding without clear resolution. Within this atmosphere of restraint, even silence itself began to carry meaning. The lack of official clarification encouraged further interpretation, with every absence and every reduced presence weighed more heavily by observers trying to understand the direction of internal sentiment. As a result, the sense of quiet alignment continued to deepen, not through statements, but through repetition of careful behavior patterns that suggested a shared caution shaping decisions across different layers of the institution. This gradual shift reinforced the perception that internal unity was forming quietly, even without any explicit acknowledgement from leadership. Yet beneath this silence, what further shifts are being quietly prepared inside the palace? Is this growing alignment truly stable, or a sign of deeper division forming unseen? And who will be affected next as these unseen lines continue to tighten behind closed palace doors? Stay glued. Controlled palace fallout. Following the growing tension surrounding Camilla's son, and the reported internal concerns linked to Princess Anne, the royal household shifted into a quieter and more controlled phase of response. Rather than open statements or visible confrontation, the focus moved toward managing perception behind closed doors, where every decision was shaped by caution and restraint. At the same time, reduced visibility of key individuals became increasingly noticeable, though it was often presented externally as a coincidence or simple scheduling adjustments. Appearances were adjusted in subtle ways, creating gaps that drew attention without explaining, while maintaining the appearance of normal royal activity. Behind these adjustments, communication strategies within the palace appeared carefully calibrated to prevent escalation. Messages were kept brief, statements were limited, and public narratives were shaped in a way that avoided direct acknowledgement of internal tension, preserving stability at the surface level. This approach also extended to internal decision-making, where actions affecting access and visibility were framed as routine administrative changes rather than deliberate exclusions. By presenting shifts as ordinary adjustments, the institution reduced the risk of external scrutiny while continuing to enforce quiet boundaries. Within this controlled environment, the broader situation surrounding Camilla's son remained unresolved in public view, yet increasingly defined by silence and careful distance. What was not said carried as much weight as what was visible, reinforcing the sense that internal decisions were being made with long-term caution in mind. Observers within and around the institution interpreted these developments in different ways, with some seeing a coordinated effort to contain potential controversy, while others viewed it as standard royal discipline being applied without public explanation. The lack of official clarification created space for speculation, allowing small changes in behavior and communication to be read as signals of deeper intent. In this atmosphere, even neutral actions risked being seen as deliberate, adding to the sense that the situation was being carefully managed rather than openly addressed. Despite differing interpretations, there was a shared recognition that the handling of the matter relied heavily on silence and controlled messaging. The unfolding situation suggested a broader pattern within royal operations, where internal concerns were addressed through quiet adjustment rather than public resolution. The absence of direct statements did not reduce attention. Instead, it intensified interest in how decisions were being made behind closed doors. Within this context, the earlier developments involving Camilla's son and the reported concerns associated with Princess Anne remained part of a larger and evolving narrative. While no definitive outcome had been presented, the ongoing sense of controlled silence indicated that the institution was prioritizing stability even as questions continued to grow around the true scope of the changes taking place. What is really being protected? Is this merely discipline or a deeper restructuring of power? Who benefits from these quiet removals? And what truth is still being kept from view as the palace tightens control behind closed doors moving forward now? Stay with us. Redrawn royal lines. In the aftermath of the earlier tensions, the royal household entered a phase where decisions were no longer seen as isolated reactions, but as part of a longer shift in how influence was defined and controlled. This transition did not come with public statements or visible conflict, but through careful adjustments that gradually reshaped who was seen as inside the circle of trust and who was not. Within this environment, strict boundaries were reinforced quietly, reflecting a renewed effort to protect the monarchy's structural integrity from any perceived uncertainty or blurred access. Camilla's position within this evolving framework remained unchanged on the surface, yet the atmosphere around her connection to certain internal spaces was described as noticeably more restrained. This subtle shift was not presented as punishment or removal, but as a recalibration of access designed to maintain stability within the institution. Observers noted that such quiet restructuring often signals deeper internal caution, especially when it follows concerns raised at senior levels. Increasingly, the situation surrounding Camilla's son was viewed not as an isolated incident, but as part of a broader redefinition of boundaries that governed proximity to royal influence. Interpretations varied, with some suggesting the changes were precautionary measures, while others believed they reflected a more deliberate restructuring of internal access. The lack of official clarification allowed speculation to grow, turning routine adjustments into signals that were closely analyzed by observers, both inside and outside royal circles. What emerged from this atmosphere was a clearer sense that the monarchy was prioritizing long-term control of access and influence over short-term explanation or transparency. Even without direct confirmation, the pattern of distancing and quiet adjustment suggested that internal decisions were being made with careful attention to perception and stability. In the wider narrative, this moment came to represent more than a single controversy, instead reflecting a strategic realignment of boundaries within the royal structure. The unfolding situation highlighted how questions of trust, access, and influence can quietly redefine relationships inside the institution without the need for public resolution. What remained unresolved was not whether change had occurred, but how far-reaching its consequences would become as the royal family continued to adjust internally. Within this continuing adjustment, the absence of open statements did not reduce attention, but instead intensified it, as observers attempted to interpret meaning through patterns of silence and measured behavior across royal engagements. The situation involving Camilla's son remained part of this evolving structure of interpretation, where each subtle change was weighed for possible significance within a broader institutional framework that prioritized continuity and control over explanation or public clarity, as the narrative continued to develop without resolution. The lingering uncertainty suggested that further internal adjustments could still emerge as the institution reassessed its internal boundaries in response to ongoing concerns about access, influence, and stability, while maintaining its public composure throughout the process. These developments left observers watching closely for any further indication of change ahead within. So, what do you think? Was Camilla's son truly pushed out after Princess Anne's disturbing revelation? Or is something deeper happening behind palace walls? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But don't forget to like and subscribe.